I'm Kristian Krober, and I'm an associate at Block O'Toole & Murphy. We're going to be speaking about how you share evidence with a jury, explaining how injuries that might not be obvious at first glance could still impact a client's life for the rest of their life, or at least for the next few years or decades going in the future. Well, seeing is believing, and if you have to explain to a jury why an injury is worth potentially millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, it should at a minimum be observable. It should at a minimum be obvious to a juror. And one of the challenges that we have is, obviously in a trial, we have an adversary. We have somebody who's trying to refute everything that we're saying. And to make matters worse, if you have a client who comes into court and they're not wearing a cast, or they're not in a wheelchair, they don't have crutches, it can be very hard for a juror to understand what the impact of that injury is, since at first glance the person might look fine. You might not be able to tell that someone's in pain. Just because they may not be wearing a cast or come in a wheelchair or be on crutches doesn't mean that they don't have an injury that potentially could affect them for the rest of their lives. So there are many universal truths that anyone can relate to and can understand. And as a trial lawyer, you're not necessarily trying to impress them with your medical knowledge or your intelligence. In fact, you want to be relatable. And some of those universal truths are: permanency is a problem. Instability is a problem. Swelling is a problem. Pain is a problem. For example, if you have a knee injury and you have a knee that's chronically swollen, that's still swelling up after 3, 4, 5 years, that's still painful after 3, 4, 5 years, that's still unstable after 3, 4, 5 years, no one's discovered the fountain of youth. Your knee isn't going to get better. In fact, the likelihood is your knee is going to get worse, because as we age, your body degrades. It's a natural process. Your body ages, your knees or your joints or whatever the affected region is gets older, and it wears down. And when you add a traumatic insult to that, it ages even faster. This is something that's relatable to everyone, that everyone can understand. Trial is not a time to impress somebody with your intelligence or to impress somebody with your knowledge of medicine. To the contrary, you actually want to make it so that everyone can understand what it is that you're trying to teach them. My last trial, which was about 8 months ago, involved a man who had fractured his kneecap. At first glance, this was a situation where a man came into the courtroom. He was a young man in his late 30s. He didn't look injured. He wasn't in a wheelchair. He didn't have a cast on his legs or his hands. He didn't have any crutches. But we were trying to explain to a jury how a bone that healed 5 years prior was still giving him problems. And we did that by meticulously analyzing the evidence, knowing exactly what we wanted to prove, and then showing the jury that some of these universal truths like pain, swelling, instability still existed in this man, because his entire joint, and it's not just a regular joint, it's the knee. You only have 2 of them. If your knee is affected, you might not be able to walk properly, you might not be able to run properly. He had little children, he couldn't run with his children. He couldn't teach his son how to ice skate, and he told a story to the jury about how he tried and he had to just sit on the bench and instruct his son how to skate from the bench. It was heartbreaking. But we developed the evidence to show the jury that, these universal truths applied to this man, unfortunately, because an entire joint, and it wasn't just any joint, it's the largest joint in the human body, was forever changed because of this accident. Every defendant will have a doctor examine our client. The examining doctor will write a report and share that report with our firm. It's our job, or it's the trial lawyer's job, to meticulously analyze that document look at that document, see what the doctor looked at in order to reach his or her opinions, but more importantly, look at what that doctor did not look at to reach his or her opinions. Oftentimes, it is the material or the evidence that the doctor does not look at that is most important. I had given an example about a client who had fractured his kneecap. In that case, the defendant doctor, unbelievably, did not look at a single x-ray. And so if you were to produce a witness and put a witness on the stand for a broken bone, can you imagine having a surgeon look at a jury, look at 6 people, try to convince them of whatever truth he or she was trying to convince them of, and not have looked at a single x-ray? Why wouldn't a defense attorney want the jury to look at the entirety of the evidence? Why wouldn't the defense attorney want an expert, somebody who's coming into court, who's being paid to give expert advice or expert opinions, look at the entire record? Unless that defense attorney was hiding something, unless that defense attorney didn't want the jury to know something. And oftentimes the thing that the defense attorney doesn't want the jury to know is the most important thing. And so it's our job to scrutinize the evidence, to know the full record, to review all the documents, and to be meticulous when preparing for trial so that we have all of the information, we have all of the pertinent evidence, and we know it, and we can challenge the defendant experts, and we can tell the jury, this is what was not shown, this is why that is important. Lawyers are going to have many cases in their career. They may have hundreds or thousands of cases after they take your individual case. But for most of our clients, if not all of our clients, the injuries that they've sustained because of somebody else's negligence is going to last with them their entire life. And so you want an attorney who's going to look through every medical record, leave no stone unturned, and be able to fight for you and advocate for you so that for the rest of your life, you know that you've received the compensation and the justice that you deserve